some of the more advanced motion array templates require you to know how to mask, and it's actually super simple. So I want to walk you through how to do this because some of these can look really cool. So I opened up this Untouchable Guys in Premiere Pro, and now this one opened this way. So don't be alarmed if some of these open differently because of the people who made the templates to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and use like this first one as my example. I'm going into Edit, Shot, and I'm going to go to this first shot right here. And I'm just going to take like a regular headshot that I use, but you could put like more fun photos that are maybe like fit this mood a little bit more. And I'm just going to extend this out a little bit longer and scale to frame size. That way I don't have to worry about doing that manually. It's okay that there's like black on the edges because I'm just going to mask myself anyway. So now that Effects Control is open, I'm going to click this little free draw button and I'm going to zoom in to make sure that my mask is as precise as possible. I can also zoom in more if I wanted to, like I could really try hard and go all the way into 400. Sometimes I will do this if I'm really trying to make something look good, and I'll just click here, and then the straighter the lines you have there, the better, because then you don't have to make as many of these little dots. But just go ahead and click these little dots here. You have to kind of make it go the full way around you or whoever you're going to be editing. But let me zoom out and kind of do this a little faster, and you can always go back and be a little bit more picky if you want to, but it's the better you do this, the better these are going to look. So spend some time when you mask getting like really smooth lines that kind of flow with the outline of if it's a person or whatever thing that you're creating. So let's just always close this loop by clicking the final dot, and then it automatically removes my background, which is great. So I'm going to make this smaller now. And in this template, it opened up every single one of these, which I know can be really intimidating. And then you're like, where is, the original project file or my timeline? And it is right here, final render, but you can always like close these if it's obnoxious for you, or if it's just like too much to look at, because you can open them back up when they're on your timeline if you need to. Okay, so I'm gonna go back here just to the very beginning, and there I am. And I wanna change the name in the background. Instead of Rage, I will change it to something like my name, or I don't know, something. So I'll double click on this, and this is actually the text that was like in front of me, like right here. So let's go ahead and change that one to like Jeanette or something. And because my name is long, it's going to look different here, so I don't necessarily want it right there. I'm going to scroll through to see if there are any animations, and there are. It zooms in, the text moves. So if I move this text around, I might create some problems. So if I go, you see that this text box is like right here. If I were to try to like open this up, there's lots of things here, so don't be overwhelmed. I'm looking for SC _01. That's the one I just edited. So I can go through here and find, let's see, find the text. And it's probably right in front of my face, but I can't see it. So sometimes when this happens to me, I'll just like go through and hit this little eyeball, like this toggle the eyeball on and off. And if I toggle a bunch of them on and off, I see, oh, that's this layer, that's that layer. But it was this one, I just wasn't seeing it. It's named the same thing, I just didn't pay attention. But sometimes that's really helpful if you're like, which layer is that? Just go through and unclick the eyeballs so that you can see which one it is. So that's this one. So I'm going to double click it, open it up. That's this one right here. If I go back to, let's see, this layer, I have this highlighted. So in theory, I could move it now because it's highlighted inside of my timeline. But I want to show you what happens if I do this. So let's say I really wanted it here. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I go back to my final render. And in this instance, it all like looks cohesive. So you see how the name Jeanette Abrahamson zooms out? Sometimes there are keyframes that you have to go through and customize, and it's really complex. And so if you make a change like a position or something like that, then it might be hard for you to like actually customize it without going through and clicking on each thing. But in this instance, it did actually work. It didn't do a weird jump thing that I have to go back and fix, but you always want to double check that because that can be a little bit obnoxious. Sometimes you may just want to stick with what's easy and okay, I'll just put Jeanette. I don't need to put Jeanette Abrahamson, or I'll put some other text there. But in this instance, I was able to customize this, move the text down a little bit. The next one is the word rage. So let's go here, double click this next one in my edit. I'll show you where I am. I'm inside of this edit folder here on this text, and I'm going to change that to, let's see how Jeanette looks. Obviously my name is too big, so I've highlighted that. I go into my effects control and I'm gonna break this down here, and it is quite large, so I can try to make it a little smaller. Earlier it was like 900 something, so let's see what 700 looks like. That's still too big. Let's try like 600. And let's just see if this even looks good. So in this instance too, it's like really zoomed in, and so I just went too far, and it may not look the way that this was intending to look, because if you noticed here, these people's names were like pretty short, and so it kind of filled the whole screen, and that looked really cool. So you may want to consider this before you just jump in and edit, because it doesn't always look exactly the way you want it to look. So perhaps instead of Jeanette, I can pick a different thing that's like shorter or whatever. But it's just something to take into consideration. I could also move this up by clicking on this little button here. So I could move these things around, and if you see, if I move it up here, if I go back to final render and I click here, now it's up here. So you can customize these things. But you do have to work inside of some of the constraints that the template has, and the more you're willing to spend time to customize, the more you can most of the time. But a lot of time it's clicking back and forth and trying to find out how much can I really mess with this, and in this instance, should I just change the name altogether. But let's say I'm happy with this, I want it to look like this. That's my little intro. Maybe you guys want to do something like this for the beginning of your reel or something. Maybe you think that's like a cool thing. You can also go in here, and all of these are layers that you can edit, so you can customize a lot of this. You can't customize everything. If, for example, this splatter, this video here, you'll see it's this. So these little things, that's an MP4, that's a video. So I may not be able to go in and easily change the color of this because it was a video. This is just a clip. But I would be able to change the color of the text, for example, and adjust some things. So as you're looking through what you can customize, you can click here. Using these little eyeball things, you can see what other things are there here in these layers, and you kind of just have to go through and do this as you're learning how to use it, because sometimes you'll find the splatter doesn't really make sense for what I'm doing, or whatever. Maybe you don't like the grunge effect. You can turn that off or on. You don't have to delete it. You can just click this little eyeball, and when you export, that will not be part of it. Or maybe you didn't like the flares or whatever. But let's say you wanted to, for example, edit that. This is also an MP4, so that helps. There are some adjustment layers here that you can go into and tweak. So the more you want to spend time going through and changing all of these things, the more you're going to learn about Premiere Pro, which is really cool. But these templates are made so that you kind of don't need to be able to do a lot of the customization. You can just pick this and say, this is what I want. you can go in here and you can fix, you know, some of the masking, for example, by going back into effects control. This is my mask. I can go in and you know, move these little things around if I felt like, oh, I was, you know, sloppy there or whatever. I could also feather it if I wanted to, if I think that looks better. And so there's tons of cool things that you can do here. And so this is a technique you'll find in lots of different Motion Array templates, not just ones that look like this, but the masking effect is something that's pretty cool. So let's say this is something you're interested in, and now you're ready to export. You know, same deal. When you're ready, you just hit O and then File, Export. And in this instance, we're going to double check. This one's also 1920 by 1080, but it's 60 frames per second. So there's a couple of issues with the frame rate being so high. So there are a few things that you can do. You can change the frame rate here and set it to 29.97. But anytime you change frame rates, especially if I'm going from 60 to 29.97, such a, you know, it's cutting it in half really. Removing the frames usually isn't as big of a problem as adding frames that aren't there. So you want to take some time to take a look at that frame rate lecture to kind of better understand this. But basically, there are several ways to change the frame rate. The reason why I need it to be 29.97 is because this is going to end up on a timeline that is 29.97 because I'm going to go ahead and make this for TV. If I was making this for a film or for some cool YouTube channel that was really cinematic, I might want to drop it even lower to 24, and that looks great. I'm not opposed to 24, but the reason we do 29.97 is because that's what airs on TV. So that's something that's kind of important to keep in mind. If I were to put a 60 frames per second video onto my timeline that was a 29.97, it could create some issues, you know, for whoever the video editor is, depending on several factors. So it's just important to be aware of this and to understand it. So this is one of those instances where now we found one that was like a really off frame rate. You're also going to find different aspect ratios and pixels. So like sometimes Motion Array, specifically After Effects, which we're going to look at next, might be 4K. And so you can export a 4K sequence, and that's really not as bad as, you know, putting a 4K sequence on top of something that's like a 1920 by 1080. It's going to look better actually that way, but it's harder to go the other way. So feel free to ask me any questions if you have any about that. Same deal, you know, change your output name. It's exporting in H.264, and hopefully you have fun playing around with the masking in Motion Array.